Kiran, now
Yeah,
my $1 million question, and that is, what is the role of probiotics in the health of the microbiome?
and that's a very, very important question. In fact, the answer to that question has changed quite a bit over the last 3 to 5 years. Now, if you would have asked any scientist who studies probiotics 10 years ago what the role was, they would tell you, well, probiotics are these healthy organisms that live within the gut, Lactobacillus and Bifidobacter, and what we're doing with probiotic therapy is reseeding the gut with these good bacteria. So the idea has been to grow these bacteria up in large factories, encapsulate them, put them in products, and then you re-swallow them. They get in, and then they reseed your gut with these good beneficial bacteria. The idea to, of course, shift the balance between good and bad bacteria. However, that was all developed prior to any understanding of the microbiome at all. We now come to know that you really can't reseed your gut. I mentioned in a previous comment that 838 days after birth, that's 2.5 years after birth, you have your full established microbiome. At that point, you can't really reseed your microbiome with different organisms, especially Lactobacillus and Bifidobacter, because those are the predominant organisms that you get from mom. And all the lacto and bifido in your system is totally unique to you. There are no two individuals in the world that have the same distribution of Lactobacillus and Bifidobacter species in their gut. And so it's all totally unique to you. That's the most unique aspect of your entire body and your entire being is your microbiome. Even your DNA is not that unique because identical twins have exactly the same DNA, yet identical twins have different microbiomes. That's how specialized it is. So the idea of taking 5, 10, 15, 20 different strains, growing them up, and reintroducing every day to try to reseed the gut just doesn't work anymore. We know that most of those bacteria just die through the gastric system. They don't really make it to the intestines alive. And if they did, they wouldn't have the capability to actually colonize and live within the intestines because they are now adapted to living in a factory. And in a factory environment versus a gut, which is a very different environment, and it has 100 trillion other competitors. Now, that being said, there are a number of Lactobacillus and Bifidobacter-based products that have clinical evidence that they do have a positive impact on the gut. And there's no denying the clinical evidence. I'm not going to say that clinical evidence is false. What is different about it is understanding what those bacteria are actually doing in the gut to provide those symptomatic benefits. That's where the story is changing. They're not going and living in the gut. They're actually just passing through. They're totally transient. They move through as fast as food does. So within a 24-hour period, they're gone. But as they move through, certain strains have the ability to modulate the immune response because most of your immune tissue is in the gut. Also, a lot of those strains die off in the stomach and they release their DNA. When they release their DNA, that DNA actually has an impact on the DNA of your microbiome and can create something called a metabolic response to the presence of that bacteria. Now, this has been proven actually by several studies that have looked at the same strains and heat killed them and then administered them, and they have the same effect. So the heat-killed versions of these strains, the dead versions of these strains, have the same effect as the live versions. And so they're not probiotics by the scientific definition of probiotics because they're not live organisms that live in your gut and create a functional change in your gut permanently. What they do is they create a metabolic response in your gut as you consume them. And no different than a herbal would, no different than a vitamin would. You wouldn't take a vitamin just once. You need to take the vitamin every day because the vitamin goes in, creates a metabolic response, and then the vitamin gets used up. In this case, the probiotic goes in, creates a metabolic response, and then it comes out in fecal matter. And so that's why when you stop taking a lot of those probiotics, the symptoms that you've been dealing with come right back. So you're not really fixing the core of the issue that you're dealing with. Let's take IBS as an example. IBS has many different etiologies, many different causes to it. But most people suffer from either a chronic constipation IBS or chronic diarrhea IBS, and there are a number of probiotic products, Lactobacillus and Bifidobacter-based products, that do help control symptoms of IBS. And if you stop taking the product, the symptoms are going to come back. And what that indicates is that we're not creating a functional change in the microbiome, and we're not curing that problem. And that's really where we want to focus on probiotic therapy is there a type of bacteria that has the ability to go in, survive through the gastric system, actually live in the gut, and create a functional change both to the microbiome and the immune system so you can actually eliminate problems like IBS, Crohn's, colitis, allergies, asthma, those kind of things, rather than just trying to manage the symptoms. And so that's the big difference.
Yes, and that is so enlightening, because for myself, having been involved in this area of so-called expertise, it's illuminating to recognize how much we know since the human microbiome project,
right.
and how it defies all the facts that we ever thought were correct, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a total paradigm shift in what we believe to be our understanding of the gut. And we were working in the blind for 110 years. Yes. Since the discovery of probiotics, we really didn't know anything about the system we were working on. And what's exciting about it is that we all have the privilege of living in the age where we're coming to understand this knowledge. Right. And that's a great privilege to have, because now we know the cause of so many different conditions that plague people. Now we know where it all starts. Mm-hmm. And that gives us a chance to go after it. It gives us a chance to actually resolve these problems. People shouldn't have to live with the kinds of low quality of life that they do with the gut symptoms that they have, the food sensitivities, the allergies, all those things. And now that we have a better understanding of the system, where it all comes from, it gives us an opportunity to actually target those particular issues.
Okay.